Yo, welcome back everybody. Today is a very special day because it's not a Naga gameplay video. I know a lot of you guys have been as frustrated as I am playing a game where one tribe has effectively invalidated all other scaling lines in the game. Sure, there was a Murloc game here or there was a Quillboar game here or there, but like 98% of first place boards over the last 8 days, 9 days now, it's been a long week, have been an imbalanced Naga board. And today we have nerfs. The nerfs are here. What should have happened since day one and had a balanced tribe introduced to the game, or at least a more balanced tribe, rather than the oppressive overlords that Nagas have become. So without any further ado, we're jumping into the 23.2.2 patch notes. Bam. Which starts with Flurgl getting nerfed. That's not a Naga nerf. Still, really necessary considering that Flurgl was still overperforming at high MMR and especially at lower ratings. Even with Nagas being as oppressive as they are, this is a really good change to head off a problem that is going to present itself very quickly once we have Nagas toned back down, and that is that effectively forcing a Murloc scaling line and then being able to go to 6 and just play straight into the new 6-star young Murkai. It's just too strong. It's just too consistent, and it made really big boards every single time. He takes a sip. We're not editing that out. This is live, one shot. We're doing patch review. Armor changes coming. There are a ton of these. We're not going to go through every single one of them, but basically the tempo heroes that were previously in tier 2, tier 3, or tier 4 have pushed their way back up to the top to tier 1, so they lose all their armor. A couple things have dropped way back down. Not sure why Onyxia was anything but last tier from the start. That hero power practically does nothing outside of Avenge comps. Kragg and Aranna drop down a little bit. Deathwing, Elise, Kurtrus. Basically, it's just a small rebalancing of a couple heroes that needed a little bit more extra armor. Seems fine, right? Like, these are small changes and they're good changes to allow for a little bit of micro tuning. That's why the armor system's there. Heroes underperform or overperform a little bit and you can help their win rates ever so slightly. Obviously, it does not fix a problem with a fundamental flaw in a hero, but it tweaks them a little bit. Not going to go through all of those. You can go through those in your own time. We can make this slightly bigger, I suppose, for this portion here, but this is the meat and bones, the most important part of the changes, and that's the snail change. No, the Naga nerfs. The Naga nerfs are pretty much uniformly across the board with all key minions for Nagas. Took small either stat losses or fundamental changes in the card text / Tavern tier. So starting with Snail Cavalry, which was one of the highest win rate early game cards we have ever seen in this game. And that's because Snail Cavalry just snowballs for free, right? One mini Myrmidon on the board in Snail Cavalry, and you're buying a minion on Tavern 2, which is effectively scaling to like 512, 514 before you're selling it off the board. It is really hard to argue that a 2-star is balanced if it is effectively the stat line of 2 4-stars by the middle of the game. And you get it as early as turn 3. So it's winning you rounds, it's getting bigger, it's winning you rounds, it's allowing you to power level. These kind of cards are the kind of cards that cause the ultra scaling, ultra power leveling, and the early access to 6 stars, which was so problematic in this patch. There's a reason we rated Snail Cavalry either S tier or like A tier pretty much every time on a tier list. It doesn't win the game by itself, but it is super strong pretty much at all times. Let's get rid of that little toolbar here. There you go. We'll have a little bit better desk real estate here. Lava Lurker nerfed by 1 health. This is honestly, I didn't see this change coming. Lava Lurker was a card that we saw initially and thought this was going to be absolutely ridiculous. But the way that Naga ended up turning out, they couldn't really afford to have minions on the board that didn't either have, Athissa Siren text on them, or on them have Spellcraft, so that at the end of the turn, Naga Siren was triggering more Spellcraft to trigger Athissa, to in turn make minions bigger. Sure, Lava Lurker can be a permanent Divine Shield minion, but it doesn't help scale your board, and when we're getting in the ultra scaling metas, if you are a slower scaler than other people, then you're punting, right? There's a reason this card has had lower performance than we expected. Took another nerf though, and maybe this is a sign that from internal testing, that Naga's shifted a little bit and still did pretty well, playing toward like mid-game minions on the board instead of just the ultra scaling Athissa, Siren, Spellcraft all over the board. We'll see. Doesn't seem like a bad change. A 2/4 body on Tavern 2 is still competitive. And on top of that, once you put the first Spellcraft spell on it, it is now an above average minion. So like, that's good. Shoal Commander takes a 1 attack nerf. Likewise, this is not a fundamental change that's going to be like, oh my god, this card is now invalid. No. It's just small changes to minions to help even out the overwhelming amount of stats that are on the tribe. Awkward, right? Tavern 3 minion with 1/2 stat line? That is incredibly small. But that being said, at the very least, it's a 1/1 buff, so it's at the very least a 2/3. Most of the time, it's closer to like a 4/5 or 5/6. Still a very good card. Still really, really strong come late game. Great synergy with Lava Lurker. Still a really good card. Alright, now we get the big ones. We went through the little ones first. The big ones. Stormscale Siren. Buffed to 6 attack, 5 health. Buffed. What do you mean, Bofer? And then changed to Tavern 5. No longer do we have Tavern 3 Stormscale Siren. A lot of people predicted this would be the change. Instead of gutting the passive scaling on Naga, they're just moving it up so that it's not easily accessible. If you move cards like this, number one, you reduce the number of them in the pool, because on Tavern 5 you have fewer minions than exist on Tavern 3. And additionally, you make it so that you can't just hit this thing immediately. And as soon as you have Orgazoa, or as soon as you have Athissa, you're online and scaling and generating extra gold, etc, etc, etc. So you make it harder to get online. And there were a lot of heroes that really abused the fact that Naga had a ton of baseline stats at early Tavern tiers, and a lot of stats on the, you know, the 6 stars, to be able to get a hold of a combination of like 2 cards and immediately stabilize. So heroes like Galakrond or heroes like Shudderwalk that very heavily relied upon getting a hold of those early stats and then stabilizing off of them are going to have a much harder time stabilizing off of this nerfed version of Naga. So that's pretty cool. Like the honest way of like, oh, we leveled, we went to 5, we found this, we tripled into a 6, we got a Athissa, whatever it is, turn 9, turn 10, it's still going to be able to play toward Naga, but getting a hold of 1 or 2 of them early doesn't stabilize immediately, and you can't just drop yourself to 10 health and turn around and have 4 times the stats of other people on the board. Sure, you can still do the turnaround, but it's much riskier. Now, obviously, we still have a few patch notes to go. I've already gone through this, so I know what's coming, so I'm alluding to that a little bit here. But a couple others. Critter Wrangler, still on Tavern 5, reduced from a 5/5 to a 5/6, and having its buff removed or reduced to a 2/1 instead of a 2/2. Cannot speak today. That being said, this is a small change, right? But the one thing that does come to mind when we look at this, take a small breather, is that we now have 3 5-stars from Naga and 2 6-stars on Naga. It's a super top heavy comp now, or bill or tribe. What's the actual term? Minion type that Blizzard uses, not tribe. Which means that a lot of the cards are going to be not accessible in the middle of the game and very accessible come late game. Or effectively, like, when you're tripling, you're more likely to hit Naga stuff than other stuff. Which is interesting to think about. This isn't really a big huge change, right? Critter Wrangler was like I didn't get Athissa, I can use this card in a pinch to stabilize for a little bit while I look for Athissa type of card. I think that still kind of remains the same. I can't see myself picking up a 2/1 buff on 2 minions or whatever that often in the middle of the game. But before, a 5/7 stat line along with a couple maybe 2/2 permanent buffs was like, oh yeah, I'm gonna do that. That's like a Mithrax, you know? And a Mithrax is a good pickup in the middle of the game most of the time. May not stay on your board, but it's very strong for the time period that's on the board. And the big ones. Tide Mistress Athissa, old 7/8, new 7/3 baseline stats. That is a massive reduction in immediate power picking up the card. Think about being Galakrond and taking a turn 5 Athissa. You're just going to hemorrhage health instead of stabilizing really quickly and being able to allow yourself to power level. Additionally, after you cast a spell, give 4 friendly minions 1/1 has been reduced to 3 friendly minions plus 1/1. So we now have 75% of the scaling from Athissa and a bad Tavern 6 stat line. Good. This needed to happen. Like, this card was so oppressive. A 7/8 stat line up front is very strong, immediate tempo, and most of the time you can trigger 1, 2, or 3 procs or so on the first turn that you have Athissa. So you're casually just dropping a 7/8 on the board that buffs the board like 12/12. Yeah, oh yeah, that's a 6-star, that's like a 20/20. I wonder why nobody else is competing with this card. Now, sure, it's still very good, don't get me wrong, but with the reduction in stats, that same scenario where you would have gotten a 19/20 total stat line is now, instead of being a 12/12 buff to the board, is a 9/9 buff to the board and a baseline 7/3, which means it's closer to, like, you know, a 16/12, which is way more reasonable early in a game. Sure, it can still snowball. Sure, it can still synergize with Orgazoa and Siren and everything else that allows you to play a ton of scaling to the board. We don't need to completely remove the viability of the tribe minion type. But this is significantly reduced scaling. Very, 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 very good changes. This card was so oppressive it made the game unfun. I even took a day off streaming yesterday because I just didn't feel like dealing with the last day of Naga meta. It is infuriating to do the same thing every single game. I'm very, very happy to have this patch. And Orgazoa nerfed from a 5/9 stat line to a 3/7 stat line. This is the same logic, absolutely same logic that we talked about before, with punishing or reducing the prevalence, or let's say effectiveness, of getting a hold of these cards early and stabilizing the game. A 5/9 stat line in the middle of the game usually trades 1 for 1, oftentimes trades 2 for 1. A 3/7 stat line in the middle of the game oftentimes doesn't even trade 1 for 1. It's like getting a bonker off of your 6-star triple. That's not a very strong card in the middle of the game. Especially heroes like, say, for example, Galakrond or Shudderwalk are the ones that rely upon dropping really low, getting a hold of an early triple or 3 early triples or whatever. Their best target was Orgazoa. It is incredibly strong as a 5/9. It generates an extra minion, which is nuts, and then generates an extra minion every turn after that, right? It's like a Witchwing with targeted discovers and the ability to synergize with Spellcraft. So, like, yeah, it was really, really, really crazy early. And now it's a little bit weaker. This is the card that I argued, if we were going to make changes to Nagas, I wouldn't change Orgazoa. I think the flavor of the card and the value for this in the tribe is pretty good. That it was the ultra scaling, like the crazy amount of stats that you could put out, which was the real problem. Don't get me wrong, that's Siren and Orgazoa scaling because you generate extra minions, which then in turn generate extra stats, etc., etc. That is a big part of it. Absolutely a big part of it. But if I was going to keep any of the cards relatively the same in terms of text, it would have been Orgazoa, and then nerf cards like Athissa and like Stormscale Siren. This is cool. I like these changes. Additionally, we have a couple small tuning changes to a couple other minions. For example, Dark Gaze Elder, the Quillbore Key 6-star, that is now reduced from 4 gold, or increased from 4 gold to 5 gold per proc, so the scaling is reduced here to, instead of 1 every 4 gold being spent, you get 1 blood gem on 4 units every 5 gold. This was, I think this was pretty predictable, that if we bring down the scaling on Athissa, that 6-stars are still incredibly powerful in this pool. People are still going to be tripling in the 6s, and getting Dark Gaze, if, just say we remove Naga from the pool, like, just make that argument for the standpoint of, like, let's talk in a vacuum here. You remove Naga from the pool and you think about the scaling Malygos can put out, you think about the scaling Elementals can put out, you think about the scaling that Beast puts out, and then you look at Dark Gaze Elder and you go, wow, that's not balanced. That all it takes is like a couple Ground Shakers, Agam, or Duo on the board, and suddenly per turn you're generating like between 20-20 and 40-40. And while that isn't as broken as Naga are right now, that's still way more broken than other tribes. So if we're reducing the prevalence of Naga, we reduce the prevalence of, or the value of the other tribes as well that look like they're going to be outliers. And in a similar vein of thought here, Young Murkai takes a nerf as well. It was fun while it lasted. These boards were very memey, that if you got a hold of everything, you know, the brand Murkai plus good Battlecry synergy, you know, either Primal Fin or Begurgles. Yeah, you made some pretty crazy boards. Now it's still going to work. It's just going to be another tech card in it. I don't think this nerf is quite as big as a lot of people I've seen on message boards already talking about or overreacting to. Now, don't get me wrong, it's a big nerf. Theoretically, it's a 50% nerf in your procs. But your board strength isn't usually uniform. You don't usually have double golden Begurgle on the board and scaling, right? For a big portion of the game, you have the one Begurgle and then a secondary Battlecry that isn't very good. Or you have the one Primal Fin you're trying to proc and a secondary Battlecry that isn't as good. So saying that this is half of the scaling is a little disingenuous. It's closer to like, you know, 60 to 70% of the scaling. That's still a big drop in total stats, but once again, we nerfed the other scaling tribes. This thing was one of the premier ways of getting a ton of stats on the board. Murlocs don't need to be oppressive with stats and effects and poison, and it's just like, this one was a disaster waiting to happen if they did not head this off. Now the golden version has been built as the original version of Murkeye, so at the end of the turn, both adjacent minions trigger, and not the left minion for Murkeye triggers twice. I don't think I actually said what the change to Murkeye was. I just let you guys read the text on the screen. Instead of it being both adjacent Murlocs trigger their battle cries, it's just the Murloc to the left of Murkeye that triggers its battle cry. So half of the minions. Just left, not left and right. And the golden version is both instead of both of them twice. It could have been written as, you know, the left minion twice. This is actually weaker than the left minion twice, right? Same logic as before. If you have one good Murloc and one bad Murloc, then you're going to trigger both of them instead of the one good Murloc twice, etc., etc. But yeah, that covers the Battlegrounds changes. There are quite a few good ones here. I was a little surprised to see that they didn't remove and or redesign the extra Myrmidon on Tavern 5, whatever its name is. I can't even think of what its name is off the top of my head. The 2/2 that doubles stats, because it is so situational in the game right now. Maybe it's better with Athissa changes. Don't know. I'm not going to go over any more here. There's a ton of standard and duels and other changes in the patch notes. Patch notes will be linked below in the description. But I'm looking forward to being able to play other stuff and bring videos to you guys that is a variety, or from a variety of comps, instead of it all being Naga Stone. Thank God we're out of this. It was just like Quillbore Nightmare that we had patch whatever 0.0. And now we have a little bit more balance of a game. All right, guys, take care. Have a great day. And I'll see you out there in Battlegrounds. Peace.